Hey everyone, welcome to Vizlib Appy Hour. This is the show where we help you make your data talk, and I'm here with Emily. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
We're doing part 3 of a 3-part series called Let Your Data Do the Talking, and we're just going to go through some dashboards. If you want to see part 1 and part 2, feel free to check us out on our YouTube. Just look up Vizlib Appy Hour on YouTube, and you should be able to see all our past videos. Yeah, let's jump right on in. But before everything, what are you drinking today?
Today I've got a lime seltzer.
Ah, cool. It's getting green screened out. I
Yeah.
just have, it's not really a seltzer. It's like a, it's not a soda either. It's just like sweet seltzer water.
All right.
It's like a French thing, I guess.
Well, cheers.
Yes. Cool. Do you want to get started and just jump right on in?
Sure. So I'll start off by reminding everyone what we talked about in the first 2 parts of the series. So like Jane mentioned, we're doing a 3-part series called Let Your Data Do the Talking. And in the first part, we talked about getting to know your data. So really understanding your audience, what their needs are, what the questions that they're asking are, knowing the context of our data, really getting into the details of how it was collected, why it was collected, really what the purpose behind that data is. And then actually going into the meat of the data and saying, what are these fields that we have available to us, knowing how it was collected, how does that impact the quality of our data, and then using all of that information to then help us tell the story. So in part 2, we talked about telling the story, how to choose the right visual based off of the data relationship that we're trying to show. We talked about removing clutter, so the things that distract us and our audience from getting to the point of the visual that we're creating. And then finally, drawing focus. So using pre-attentive attributes to draw focus into that data story that we're sharing in our visual. Things like color or size or shape, all of those pre-attentive attributes draw our focus and our attention on that piece that we're trying to show in our visualization. And then finally, this week, we're going to do part 3. We're going to talk about implementing all of this. So bringing this together into a dashboard, we're going to talk about how to apply some design techniques in our dashboards. We're going to talk about bringing it together. So we're going to show a couple of different dashboards and talk about those different aspects that have been brought together and why those dashboards look really clean and draw your focus onto certain elements. And then we're also going to talk about some tools and resources that can help you further your data literacy. You ready to dive in, Jane?
Yes, let's do it. I've been waiting all week to do this. If anyone's been following, as you know, I'm planning a road trip, and I just want to know where to go based off of COVID information, maybe some hiking, some fast food information. Yeah, I'm excited to jump in, but let's start by talking about what we need to include in our dashboard before we just go in and start making our dashboard.
Awesome. So let's talk about some design techniques. The first one that I'm going to go over today is affordances. Affordances are aspects that are inherent to design that make it obvious how a product should be used. One of the examples I really love to describe affordances with is kitchen appliances. Any kitchen appliance that has a handle on it, we intuitively know to grab that kitchen appliance with our hands and use it as a hand tool. So an affordance would be that handle that shows us how to use that tool without us even having to read an instruction manual or go about that. So how do we apply affordances in our visualizations? We can use affordances to help us highlight, draw focus, or create information hierarchy. So what I did here is I set up my slide or my container to get you to read that large word first, and then read the next smallest, and then finally that last smallest word. And then all the way at the top, you can barely even see it. You might read this last because it is the smallest text. So one of the elements of design that we can implement is just the size of our text. no matter where on the screen, or maybe even the size of our visuals, no matter where on the screen it is, our eyes are drawn to that largest component first, and then the next largest, and then the next largest, and finally the smallest. So when we're thinking about creating a visualization, we might use the largest font for our title so that our eye is drawn to the title first. And then maybe the next largest font is on our axes so that we're, going through the axes and understanding what that visual is showing us. And then maybe we have labels on our charts, and those labels are the last smallest size to help us bring that attention in an orderly fashion. Next, we have accessibility. So this is the second A word of design, accessibility. So we have accessibility. This is it's usable by people of a variety of backgrounds. So it helps our audience, no matter what their technical skills or their background is. The accessibility that we bring into our dashboard gives everyone kind of a level playing field as they go into that dashboard. I mentioned here, keep it simple. So don't go overboard trying to make your dashboard overly explanatory, but the best way or the easiest way to go about doing this is using text to bring clarity. I love titles of charts that are really descriptive. They don't just say this versus that, or money over time. Those kinds of chart titles aren't descriptive enough to give all of our users of our dashboard the same going in standpoint. So we might have an executive who really understands what that money over time means. And then we might also have a busy bee worker who's like trying to get to understand the business, and they need to get a little bit more context to understand what that means.
So like a really good dashboard, you would say, would be just readable to anyone who wants to read it.
I wouldn't say anyone, because that makes your audience really broad. The first topic that we talked about was getting to know your audience. And sometimes narrowing our audience makes our dashboards and our visualizations much more impactful. I would say that accessibility, not that it makes everyone, but particularly your audience, really able to kind of come to that dashboard with that level playing field. So if I have a dashboard that I'm creating for an operations team, I might use different titles than the executive level dashboard that I'm creating. So that's a really quick and easy way to reuse the same visualizations, but really just tweak it to the audience that we're focusing on.
Right. This brings us back to part one. Knowing your audience is very key.
Yes. So I'm going to show an example of this. I guess it might be a little bit small on this screen, but our two examples here are just two different title types. We're commonly using things like action and adventure movie scores. That tells me what's in this chart. I didn't even give you the full picture of the chart because it really doesn't matter what was on the chart. But that title just says, okay, I'm showcasing action and adventure movie scores. They're probably in red because the title, is indicating red. Well, the second example here, action and adventure movies received the highest and lowest audience score of all movies analyzed. So now I'm really drawing the audience to the point that I'm trying to make with that visualization. And I'm highlighting all of the action and adventure movies in red. So they're really getting a lot of information out of that title without going into much detail.
Are you a bigger fan of longer titles, or are you a bigger fan of small titles but with maybe a subtitle that kind of further explains?
Yeah, I think that's really designer's choice. Whatever works for you. I personally like to use long titles occasionally, as long as they're descriptive and they're really getting the point across. I think that they're great. It goes back to affordances. So the subtitles will have a smaller text. So if that's something that's okay for the information that you're trying to give across in that subtitle, I think that's a great use of a subtitle. But if you really want to just drive home that main point, I would just put it all in that main title.
Okay, cool. Let's ask our audience too. Are you a bigger fan of the long title or short title plus a subtitle?
Yeah. And I'll even throw another one out there. Doing annotations on your chart is another great way to add that context and clarity. So, maybe you go for that shorter title, but you add in the annotations in your chart that make it, really pack a punch.
We have a comment saying board members usually only have time to read one word. So maybe
Yes.
short titles and then subtitles.
Yeah, and especially with those, you want to make sure you're removing that clutter. You don't want them to focus on any of the gray dots. You just want them to see action and adventure, or really apply those affordances very, very effectively, so that they are going right to the point.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, this one's a good point. Design is better with a short title, but for data literacy, longer is better.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that words really add a little bit of clutter from a design perspective. But when we're going for data literacy and we're really trying to bring our organization along in that journey, the longer titles or the more text. And I think even creative ways of adding that text are a great, design friendly avenue to come down. I'm going to jump into aesthetics, but keep those ideas coming. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes.
So our third element of design is aesthetics. So we talked about affordances and accessibility. Aesthetics is the third. Aesthetics is really coming along to color, alignment, white space, looking at those different elements and how it comes together on your dashboard or your visualization. Keep it simple again. Really here, white space is good. It's not a bad thing to have a slide or a dashboard or an email that has white space on it. That gives our audience space to think and process the information that we've given them. If we've brought in so much clutter and call outs and action items and other text, we're really just not allowing them to digest the information that we've given them in our visualization. So I do want to encourage, you could spend like your entire degree learning about design, but you don't have to be a designer to be able to apply some basic principles into your dashboard. So I think there's definitely a balance here. We're not all going to be UI UX designers, but we certainly can learn some really key components that we can bring into our visualizations and our dashboards that drive home the points that we're trying to make.
We have a great question from Josh. If your chart needs a title, did the chart work?
That's a good question. I'm going to answer with what one of our other audience members said. And I think that from a data literacy perspective, chart titles are incredibly important. It gives the context of our data. It brings our audience the information that they need in order to discern the story that's coming across in that visualization. So yeah, I would say that chart titles are maybe necessary for our charts. Maybe not for all things, like maybe a map wouldn't need a chart title if it's descriptive enough within the map, or other KPIs and things like that. You might not need to apply a title, but I'm going to say for the sake of data literacy, let's keep the context within our dashboards. What do you think, Jane?
I agree. I think sometimes just having, a lot with line charts, for example, if you just have, a line chart and then maybe like dollar amounts, what is this profit? Is this spending? It's hard to know. So yeah, I think maybe a title would be useful, but I don't believe every chart requires like a title, subtitle, and plus a footnote. I think that sometimes will be overkill.
Yeah, that's a great point. Aesthetics can be really personal too. So, and design as well. So I don't want to say that one answer is the only answer. It's just all about how you apply it and the audience, again, the audience that you're speaking to with your visualizations. So I'll show here just, these are really small, but the idea, even from a zoomed out perspective, we're not looking at any of the details of the data, the numbers, the values that are on these two dashboards side by side. But we can easily see, the one on the left maybe is a little bit burdened by borders and extra text that might not be necessary. It's got some really harsh colors. However, the one on the right is toned down a little bit. That black has turned to gray. So some of the less important text is fading into the background. The colors are a little bit more muted, so maybe a little bit more appeasing or appealing to some people. And a lot of those extra borders have now vanished. So we're not, sectioning off areas or, asking our user to scroll within charts. We're really just bringing that clarity right to the forefront. So I'd like to take a minute to just start diving into some dashboards, Jane. I think we've picked a few already that we can walk through and just talk about the different aspects of design that the creators have implemented. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And if anyone in the audience has something to add, please let us know, whether it's something that you really like or something that maybe could be changed for the better. Feel free to just shout it out in the comments.
Yeah. And I will say all of these dashboards that we're going to show are publicly available. They weren't necessarily created by us, but I think that they showcase a lot of really great elements of design that we could take and bring into our own dashboard design. Okay. So I think this will be the first one that we go through, Jane. What is the first thing that stands out to you on this dashboard?
Well, the first thing would be just the color. It's very punchy. It's kind of, it's there. I can see the grouping is pretty easy. Personally, I might have selected, a different pink versus like rosy. I don't know what to call that color, like a rosy pink. It's a little bit similar. So in the bar charts, can get a little confusing. But yeah, I like that they used colors to group things together.
Yeah. See, the first element, that pre-attentive attribute of color, is what has drawn your eye to create those groupings or categories for each of these regions. Is there anything else that stands out to you? Just first glance, we're very zoomed out right now on this dashboard.
Yeah. Well, the line charts are a little confusing.
Okay.
Just off the bat, I'm thinking, okay, what do these mean? What are those dots? But overall, I think it's not a bad looking dashboard. But once we get into it, maybe we'll see that things could be added.
Yeah. I definitely agree. I think there's some elements that are really tiny on this dashboard, and that makes me think that they're maybe not as important, or the details, the person who's developed this dashboard doesn't want those details to be the forefront of the message that's coming across.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you noticed across the top, this is one of the elements I really like about this dashboard. Across the top, they have placed a filter category. So no matter the filter that I choose, all of the visualizations stay exactly the same. So I only have to figure out, the theme once, and then I can get it all the way down the dashboard. But then also for every filter that they've put on the dashboard, everything updates within the same chart types. So I'm not dissecting that same information over and over again. I am learning it once and applying it across all of the categories and filters that they've given me.
We have a great question that came in. Are there any colors that we would never use in a dashboard?
My go-to answer for that is yellow. What about you, Jane?
Oh, really? My go-to answer is red.
Oh, okay.
Is
that because it has meaning behind it typically?
Yeah, because red, sometimes it just, when people see that, they'll think negative or bad or like don't do. So I was actually always told to not ever use red. This is when I started making dashboards. They say don't avoid red and green if you can, but if someone definitely wants something in red or green, then make sure that your positive and negatives are a different color. Because you don't want to use, green for the design, but then also have green as a positive or a negative. They say just avoid that color. So yeah, red and green are colors I kind of try to avoid sometimes.
I just say yellow because it's hard to see.
Oh.
I think that green and red can be applied sparingly and applied well.
Yeah.
Like you said, in certain cultures, it does have, that meaning behind it, where it can mean, good or bad, or if people think about the stoplights, the red, yellow, green, that kind of thing that, it's like an affordance where I don't have to give any information for the audience member, the user, to be able to discern what I mean by those colors. So that's something I actually really like, is I don't have to go in and create maybe a legend or a key, because those colors already have meaning to the audience. So I think that's a really good question. And I think that the biggest thing to remember about color is to use it meaningfully. One of the best tips that I've gotten from one of the books that I've read on data storytelling is to start with gray. So if you're a dashboard designer and you're throwing colors in left and right, and then you bring all your visuals together and it's just like a rainbow, that's not a great way to design a dashboard. If you start everything in gray and then bring meaning with color, once you've brought your charts together, I think that's a really valuable way to apply color in a dashboard.
Wow, what a great advice to give to people.
Yeah.
I think I should start doing that, because
I don't think any designer would say start with gray, but that's my tip.
I like that, because I actually start with just, I don't know why, but I always try to start with colors, and sometimes it kind of, it boggles me down, because then I'm just stuck on picking the perfect colors for way too long.
Yeah. Well, you can always get stuck at the end too. All right.
Something that, now that you've zoomed in on this, something I've noticed is, do you see that black bar on the progress bar? Yeah, I don't know what that black bar means. I think context there would have been great.
I agree. I think that they're missing context in a couple of places. So, for example, on these line charts, they've told us that the dashed line means average, but they haven't told us, for example, what their line here means. Maybe that's like the monthly target against the full year, or where they should be at this time this year versus the full year. We don't really have that context. Again, we might make the assumption based on this being average that this dashed line is also average, but we don't know that. So I think there's definitely some context that's missing in this dashboard. But some elements that I really like are the removal of some of the extra lines. So you'll notice that even on this chart here, this is a bar within a bar chart, and they're kind of using it a little bit like a gauge, but they've removed this axes. That's not necessary. Our eyes are drawing that line for us because all of our bars are already aligned. So we don't need that axes to create that visual line for us. They've left in the numeric axes across the bottom for the measures. I think even that might not be necessary because they've put in labels and we have some tooltips that give us the exact values for each of these items. So I might even say that one's not even necessary. But yeah, I also wanted to say that I like how they've kind of put in gray this line chart over time for the furniture, office supplies, technology. They've basically told us it's not really important. What I want to show you here is the max and the min. And so I'm seeing the max and the min on every chart, and I'm seeing, maybe how furniture has peaked later and how technology peaked way, way in the past, and has really come up to some low spots recently, but maybe is peaking again. So that kind of information, it's keeping me out of the details, out of the weeds of the data, and really just pointing out those main points that I think that the developer of this dashboard wanted us to gather. Anything else, Jane, that you notice?
I also like that each of these sections are exactly the same. So once you understand one, you just need to go through each of the others. I can see, it's possible for someone to say, oh, I want to point this out in the east and maybe that out in the south. So then they'll have different charts for different regions. And I think that would have been a little bit more confusing. So I do like the consistency in this dashboard.
Yeah.
One little thing I think I would have changed is in the maps. Right. I'm assuming that the bubble size is the sales. So I would have maybe colored it, or I would have showed it by having different degrees of color opacity rather than a bubble size.
Okay. So you'd almost like duplicate that message by saying the size and the color represent how much or how large the sales were.
No, I would not have the bubble size. I would
Ah,
just
okay.
have it colored.
So an
Uh,
area,
yes,
like just color in the area of each of
right.
these. I see. That's a really interesting idea. Um, do you think that would distort the audience's perspective because each state has a different size? Do you think that the color might get lost in the size of the state? For example, California, it does
Mhm.
technically have the largest sales clearly in this view, but maybe it would stand out too much if even if it didn't have the largest amount of sales just based off of the color that it was.
Possibly. I think I would have to try it and see, but,
Yeah,
for just looking at, the state next to California, which I believe is Nevada.
that's Nevada.
Okay. I mean, like, Neva I would say other than California and Washington, all the other bubbles look kind of similar, and it's hard to tell which state is doing better.
hmm So you
So
think color is going to get that comparison across a lot easier than the size of the bubble?
I think so. I would try it first, see how it looks, and
Yeah.
then decide.
I think that's a really great idea. I personally, based off the way that this person has designed the dashboard, I love the way that they did it because
Mhm,
I can see that they're intentionally not adding additional colors. And so using size, I think, is a great alternative to color. I think in other dashboards, though, that would be, really applicable where we could, look at using color instead of the size.
mhm.
And I see
Josh
we have
has
a
a
comment about adding in the number, the numeric
yeah.
value into that. And I think, definitely we have that tooltip where you hover over and you see that information, but maybe just placing it on the visual that's not going to add too much clutter in this case, I think.
Yeah.
So let me zoom us back out. Are you ready to move on to our next visualization?
Yes, let's do it. I like these colors, though.
Yeah,
It's very
totally different
visually
color
appealing.
scheme here.
Yes.
So, Jane, do you want to start us off again? What are you noticing?
Ooh, okay. First thing I noticed was what you talked about in our first episode. Um, using questions as titles is a really great way of, getting what the point of the chart is. And yeah, I've taken that to heart and I've started doing that, and I think doing that here is really great. Um,
Yeah, that's a really interesting point to bring out first. I think even in their subtitle of the entire dashboard, they've asked a question.
mhm,
So I think that's a really neat application across this entire dashboard where they're bringing, questions to the forefront, but allowing the audience member to discern what the answer to that question is by really applying some very clear visualizations. What are some other things that you notice? How have they used color or other pre-attentive attributes that we've talked about?
I think the color is quite muted, which I think
Mhm.
is good. It plays off each other. My eye isn't drawn so much to any one particular thing. I'd say maybe the bar chart on the very left, just because it's the darkest kind of area.
Yep.
But yeah, it's not pulling my eyes in different directions, which I think is really great.
Yeah. It definitely seems like they've added color in here to bring some just, visual appeal to the
Mhm,
dashboard, but they haven't used color. I think all but one area, they haven't used color in a super like meaningful way. Like my eye isn't supposed to relate the color across all these different charts. It's just adding some, visual focus to the dashboard. I did notice that they put red here for the negative bar on what's our year over year change in total revenue. So like you mentioned, using red or green in a
mhm.
meaningful way. So I did notice that they applied it there. It's the only red, so it kind of stands out to me.
Yeah, there are the arrows. Are the arrows part of the chart, or is it just
It looks like these are just
explaining?
static images of the dashboard, so we can flip to this one that doesn't have those red arrows on it.
Mhm.
These are just the static images that are kind of pointing out some elements of the dashboard that have been designed, but um, yeah, the only red, I guess it stands out even more now that those arrows are gone. The only red is right here.
I do think that the way they put the filter was quite smart. It's not taking up too much space, which I think is something that could easily happen, because I find that sometimes, filters take up a lot of sheet real estate. So
Yeah.
the way they've done that is great.
I really like that they've used those affordances, the size of the text, to draw our attention to where we should go first on this dashboard. It's very clear that they want us to focus on number 1 and number 2 because those are big. They are the darkest, or they're bordered by the darkest colors. So they want us to select a measure: total profit, total quantity, total revenue, and then they want us to select a perspective: a product category, the order type, maybe the year. So that, I think, is really neat that they've done that. They've brought it all to the top right next to the title. So we read the title and then we make this dashboard our own, and then we dive into the details of that. So I really love how they've set that up. I also want to point out that they've, I think, pretty cleverly or applied in a very meaningful way, the use of borders. So I don't always love putting borders around charts, but I see how they've kind of sectioned off areas of their dashboard. What do you think about that, Jane? What does that, say to you?
In this dashboard, I think it's necessary, because if they didn't, I can just see it kind of being a jumble of information. Maybe that means that they haven't used white spaces as well as they could have.
Yeah, they certainly could have added in a little bit more padding. We call that, space between different chart elements. And I think, like you're saying, without that additional padding, they've kind of packed in as much information as possible. So they've used those borders to help us, stop our eye and focus on one area. So, very clearly, this line helps us to focus these charts together and look at that information together.
We do have a comment saying that there's not much storytelling in it. It looks very infographic-like, which, yeah, I do agree. It does look very infographic-like, and I'm not sure if you follow along this, it actually tells much of a story.
Yeah.
It does look like they're just trying to tell you all the information that they can and fit it all into one sheet.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that they have a lot of data, and they're hiding it by giving you all of these filters and things to interact with. So I am proud of the fact that they didn't try to show total profit, total quantity, and total revenue all in one view, and that they've given the audience member the ability to kind of switch between those. But yes, I definitely agree. That's a great comment.
And one more thing is, when it comes to accessibility, I don't know if that chart on the top right is very accessible for people, because it's saying what is the percent of change in total revenue, and it's just giving you the percentage of change rather than letting you see kind of the total revenue and seeing that change over year, if that makes sense. So
I love that you pointed that out, Jane. This goes back to understanding the relationship, the data relationship that we're displaying, and then what's the most effective chart type for displaying that information. And I completely agree. I don't think that a bar chart is a very effective way to communicate change over time. I also think that they've put way too much space between each of these bars and just made it kind of crazy. But can you tell me, Jane, what chart type would you immediately go to if you were trying to communicate a change over time?
Line chart, always a line chart.
I completely agree. I would have definitely used a line chart here. I might actually have done, like you said, an area line chart for the actual revenue, and then a separate line, maybe in a color that stood out that represented the change over time.
Or possibly having something on the top, like having maybe annotations that can tell you what,
Love that.
what the percent change is.
Yeah. And, I think it also might be important to understand, like, why is the change over time important? Is looking at the change over time, for each of these years what's important? Or is it just from comparing to this year versus last year that would be important? So maybe they're trying to put too much information into this chart in general, and they could have done it better with a KPI. So that's definitely something to consider as well.
We do have a comment about the donut chart. It's not bad in this case, but if you add too much to it, it'll be hard to read. Yes, I think Emily would definitely agree with you.
Can you believe that we've talked about this dashboard for so long and I haven't even commented on the donut chart? I agree. I would say that if you're going to put more than two series or parts on your donut chart, don't just get rid of it. Do a different chart type. We talked about this way back in the last episode, looking at the different chart types, and our eyes find it really hard to discern the length of that arc. And so I love here they've been very intentional. They've only showed, plan, measure type that's planned, and measure type, I guess that's maybe not planned. And so they only have those two categories. They're looking at it very specifically. It looks like they're calling out the part that is colored so that they're immediately telling you what's important about this donut chart. And it's really just I think it's just bringing focus to their KPI. It's not really adding value to have the donut chart there, but it's also not drawing away too much focus. So
I don't think a pie chart would be very useful. I feel like a gauge would have been a better representation of how close they are to their planned revenue.
Yeah. I think that they're essentially using a gauge. I would have just flopped the order and had the blue start here, like at the 12 o'clock, and wrap around. Then you always have that smaller value kind of finishing up for like what's left.
We do have another. Yamil likes the instructions 1 and then 2, so you know exactly what to do. Yeah. Select a measure and then select a perspective. I agree. I think that's very informative. Something that I've been trying to do more is if there are steps that I want people to take when looking at a dashboard, rather than trying to design a dashboard in a way that kind of makes someone intuitively know what to do, that's very difficult and it's hard to guess what people are thinking. So sometimes just writing in directions is the best thing to do.
Yeah, and they're not very, wordy about it either. It's very direct. And I would call this like guided self-service. Like they're giving you a guide on how to interact with this dashboard. So I think that's kind of cool.
Agreed. Yeah, this is visually appealing. Personally, I liked the other one that we did first better, just off the glance, but I feel like this one probably has more information packed into it. I don't know if it's easier to read, but I feel like if the right audience was looking at this, they would gain more from this chart.
Yeah.
Sorry, this dashboard.
Love it. You want to dive into the third one that we've prepared?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Here we have a revenue and expenses dashboard. What do you think of this one, Jane? What is your eye drawn to?
It's drawn to that purple right on the top. That's the first thing that I see. Yes, that, and then also in the finance report, that purple big block of text.
Very interesting, yeah.
That draws my eye, and then the line chart, because it's just a pink, it quite draws my eyes there. I would say the KPIs come last if I were to read this chart. I'd almost go clockwise if I were to read this chart. So maybe the colors could be changed to fit.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting that you point that out. When we think about like UI, UX design, one of the elements that we can kind of rely on is in cultures where we read from left to right, our eyes are naturally drawn to that top left corner. And then we kind of move across the screen and then diagonally down and then back across. And so we can use that in our development of our dashboard to, bring focus to the most important things, bring those to that top left corner, and maybe hide some of the details down here on the right-hand side where, or the bottom right-hand side, where our audience maybe won't look there first, but when they're ready to dive into the details, they'll have it there. So I think it's so interesting that the way that this dashboard was designed, it actually drew your eye to kind of go the opposite way. And so maybe a better or a way that we could improve this dashboard would be to apply color. a little bit more subtly. So it sounded like this is the brightest color, so to your attention first.
Yes.
And then this is maybe the next brightest or boldest. And so that drew your attention second. And then there's some color here, but the KPIs are maybe a little bit smaller and they don't stand out as much. And so that drew your attention last. So I certainly think that could be an improvement on this dashboard.
I think so too. I think, yeah, if we can find enough improvements, maybe we'll showcase some this on Appy Hour and try to change it up a bit. But yeah, I'd love
That'd
to
be fun.
hear everyone's opinions on this. What could we do to make it better? What do you like? What do you not like? Yeah, let us know your thoughts as well.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I'm finding distracting is maybe how large the table is. I think that, it might be better served to have, it almost feels like two dashboards to me. Like I have the one on the left and then the details on the right. I think that we could maybe just give our audience a little bit less to focus on. And maybe if I designed it more like a web page where I had the charts come up first and then they scroll down and they see the finance report, or maybe some other element that gives them a little bit of time to digest what's on the left before they jump to that table on the right with all the details.
We've got a comment saying this would be a great second sheet if you followed the DAR principle.
I don't know what the DAR principle is.
It's like, I don't know what it stands for, but it basically means the first sheet you have kind of an overview, second sheet you go into some details, last sheet it's all spreadsheets and it's like tables and it's
I see. It's kind of like the funnel effect where you have like the broad down to the really specific.
Let me look that up for you. What is the DAR principle?
Yeah, I feel like I should know this already.
I can never remember what it's dashboarding, analysis, and reporting.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, thanks, Lyra. Cool. Oh, the other thing I was going to point out here was we talked about the borders on the last dashboard. Jane, what do you think about the application of borders in this one?
I actually think it might be necessary because looking at this one, it might be a little crowded. I think white space could be used better in this dashboard.
I definitely think so too. I think that if you were to leave it this way, the borders are necessary because there's so much going on. But if we were going to I don't know how to block this from our view, but if we were to block this table and we were to focus on the left-hand side as our dashboard, I think that we could use some padding and really make that stand out by adding more white space and, giving our audience kind of just that focus, like here, focus on this line chart or focus on this KPI. What about the size of the fonts? Like if we were to focus on the left-hand side for a few minutes, Jane, what about the size of the fonts? Like what's drawing your attention or your focus over here?
Ooh, in the line chart, first of all, there's no title, so I don't even know what's going on in this chart. That would be the number one thing to change. I do think that having annotations is nice. It tells you a little bit more about the chart without adding too much clutter, and it doesn't really draw your eye away from anything. Maybe having the dots on the line chart might not be too useful. I'd actually get rid of those and just have a nice smooth line.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I do to remove clutter is I remove duplicate information. And by information, I mean visual ways of telling my audience that there's differences. So in this instance, in this line chart, we've used color to say there's a difference between these two lines. So in that case, we don't need to show that there's dashes and complete straight lines. We can just use the color and have that be our focus. But by adding two things that say the same thing, that's actually cluttering our visual. It's adding unnecessary information.
I agree. And how do you feel about having the area chart plus the line chart? Do you think it's a bit unnecessary?
Yeah. So I always try to think about area charts in a meaningful way. So when I think about area charts, I think about, way back in, linear algebra or whenever we learn this, the area under the curve.
Yeah.
So is that area important? And if it is, then fill it in and use an area chart. I don't like applying area charts just for the sake of adding like more color to the screen. I think that's a poor application of a line chart. So in this instance, we've got the cost of sales. That's the area chart. And then we have MRR, which is our, in this instance, the monthly recurring revenue. And so I think in this case, the area isn't applied meaningfully. It would probably be applied either in both or neither case if we wanted to kind of go down that avenue that I just described. I also see that in the KPI, the area chart was not used. So in that case, I'd kind of keep it consistent. I wouldn't just, like I said, apply area for the sake of applying color.
Okay, totally agree. We have a comment saying that they would not use a finance report on a dashboard because it gives you too much detail and it gives you a lot of white space.
Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, a lot of the times when I came into like dashboard designing and started building out dashboards, I always thought more information is better. The more numbers, the better. Let's throw everything in there. But yes, as I've learned, that more is not always the best. Less is more.
I think that's a really good point, Jane. I agree. I don't necessarily think that I would have put a table on a dashboard like this. However, I do want to point out that it's really key to understand our audience. And so if our audience is the finance team and we're getting them to use dashboards and be interactive with their data because we've displayed their data in a table, a finance report like this, I think that's a great application. But I think, like we said, put it at the last sheet. Don't give it right up front because they get too much in the weeds and then they miss out on the points of the trends and what our visuals are bringing across. And they just look way into the weeds on all these red negative numbers that pop out in your face.
How do you feel about the colors? I feel like they're not really making too much sense. They don't really tie in with each other.
Yeah. So there's a couple of elements of the color here that I like, and I'll point that out first. I did notice that we have expenses in a KPI, and that's colored pink, and then cost of sales, which I'm going to go ahead and assume is expenses, and they've used the same pink color. So in that instance, I think that they're applying color in a meaningful way. The one thing I don't like about the way that color was applied in this dashboard, though, like we talked about at the beginning, is how bold the colors are and where it's drawing our attention. So we lose focus on our visuals because we've brought so much attention to the top bar of our finance report. The other thing is just too many colors. So we've got a light blue, mint color, a green, a purple, and a pink. And supposedly they're all meaning different things. And so by having all of those different colors, our eye is getting pulled in multiple directions, trying to discern and draw connections across the dashboard. But maybe applying color more meaningfully is, if we really understood our audience and what the audience needed to know, maybe the most important metric for our finance team is that monthly recurring revenue. We can give that color and everything else will be in a muted tone or it could even be a color, but the same color for every other measure or dimension or whatever else is colored on this dashboard. What do you think?
What happens? Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I think having one main color and then everything else kind of be, what's the word? Helping out, like just
supporting information.
Supporting information would be really good. A follow-up question is, what happens if you are designing a dashboard for a company that maybe has multiple colors in their color scheme? How would you go about choosing which one is the most important? Kind of like, how Google, it's red, yellow, blue, and green. It's like, it's a very punchy red, punchy yellow, punchy blue, punchy green. Well, how do you choose, what comes first, what comes last?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that really getting to know the company, in this instance that you're working with, can draw some really good meaning out of those colors. So I previously worked for a company where they had a different color of their logo represented a different core value. And so knowing that, I could have brought those colors in a meaningful way in their dashboards to me, maybe one of the core values is the key focus of this page. And so I use that color prominently. And then on another page, a different color is the most prominent. So that's just one way. When a logo has a lot of colors, though, I think that you can really go off of what they do themselves. So what color are they using, most prominently to design their website, or if we were to go to the Google homepage, a lot of times they've got the Google logo across the top. And so what color are they putting in that? Or if you're, maybe on like Gmail, the red stands out the most. And so, maybe you apply the red when you're looking at email data. And then the calendar, the blue stands out the most. So you're applying blue for the color of the calendar data. Yeah.
So it goes back to knowing your audience, knowing who is going to be reading your dashboard.
Cool. Well, speaking of audience, should we jump to your dashboard, Jane?
Yes, let's do that.
All right. So I knew we wouldn't have much time to go in and actually design a dashboard today. So I put some stats together for you. And, just first appearance, what are you noticing about what I've done here?
Just first, I love dark mode. So recently I've been very into dark mode apps. So I really like what's going on. I think everything's very easy to read. There's nothing that kind of like stands out and hurts my eyes, which I think is really great. Yeah, looking here, I'm immediately connecting the green bar chart to the green text for hiking. And yeah, they do align. They're both talking about hiking, and then you can see average new cases. It's that like turquoisey blue, and I immediately connect that with the line chart, and I think, yeah, that's a great connection. For states to explore, there's that orange, and I want to connect it to the map, but then I also see the blue, and that's a little confusing, but I can see why the orange and that map would go hand in hand.
Yeah. I definitely struggled with applying, like what color to apply here.
Yeah.
But I love that you still connected it to the map. Text, what text stands out to you first?
Select states for Jane's road trip. That one. It's white. It's the biggest, and that nice big arrow immediately draws my eye towards there.
Let's pick some states. I think that, we talked, maybe you should go explore the West Coast a little bit. So what if you were to do your exploration along the West Coast here? So we've got 3 states to explore. There's the 7-day average is, close to 3,000 there. As we talked about previously, we might want to normalize that based off populations. But and then I have a hiking popularity score. This is based off of some All Trails data. So, really good hiking in this area. So you'll definitely have to check that out.
That's great. What does the color stand for in the map?
Yeah, I couldn't quite figure out how to get this bolder yet, but it says this is representing our people vaccinated. So, the bluish color being the highest number of people vaccinated, and the orange being lowest. And one thing to remember that when we do make selections, this is comparing just the 3 states that we've selected. So when we clear our selections, the West Coast here is quite blue. So that was another reason I picked it out.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes a lot more sense.
Then one of the things that I did here too is I gave you some more details about the hikes that you could explore in a viz tip here. So when we hover over the state, we can see the 5-star rating of the hikes. So this is California has an average of 4 out of 5 stars for all of their hikes. The average length is 4.2 miles, and the average elevation gain is like 860 feet. So you can know, okay, if I go to Washington, my hikes might be shorter, but they're probably going to be taller. But the rating is over 4 stars, so maybe I'm going to like those hikes better. And then if we look at Oregon, certainly we've got some shorter and less elevation gain on those hikes, and also about four stars on those. So really, really well rated hikes along that coast.
Wow, this is great. I love Viz Tips. I think it's a great way to give you information without crowding a page. I can't rave about it enough. But yeah, this is great, and it's so easy to explore. Could I see maybe Nevada and Arizona and just see how those states compare as well? Okay, great. So yeah, so the color changes based on what your selection is. And yeah, so Arizona has the most cases, the most new cases. California has the least of the new cases. Yeah, this is
Well,
a
these are the
very
vaccinations here in this
okay.
chart. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I think what I'm seeing is, as you're reading it, it's looking like we need maybe a better, a descriptive title here, because that legend is a little too muted, to help guide you in that. And maybe, like we talked about in the other map that we were looking at on that dashboard, maybe adding in some numeric values onto the chart itself, adding that layer, would really help bring some more context.
I think so. I think, yeah, adding some labels, maybe just giving you the number of people vaccinated would be very helpful.
Yeah. I would say I love that you pointed out the dark mode first when I showed you this dashboard. I actually chose dark mode because I felt that the map looked the best in dark mode. So I changed everything to dark mode. And
Okay.
it wasn't until, like I mentioned, at the very beginning, I'm just making some charts. I don't care what colors they are. And then when I bring them together, it's all about, how can I create that story that, flows through this entire dashboard. And that's when I really start picking out colors and identifying, how things will look from a design perspective, look the best. So yeah, that's why the dark mode popped up. I do want to leave.
We do have a comment. I think this is, how do you pick colors when you design a dashboard? Colorblind, and by keeping it to as few as possible.
Totally agree. Definitely don't overuse color. Typically, I would say definitely no more than 4 colors if you can help it.
We do have another comment saying that we could tweak our measure so that the color remains constant.
Yes.
And regardless of selection. Is there a reason why you chose not to keep it constant?
Yeah, I actually, I left it the way that it is because I wanted you to be able to compare, okay, once I've selected my state, so I've got a zoomed out view, and this is going to help me select a region. So I can see blue over here in like the Northeast. I can see a lot of blue over here on the West Coast. And so maybe I'm going to focus in on one of those regions. And then once you click into that region, you can really be able to compare the states side by side. So that's why I left it the way I did. But I can definitely see some value in having the colors remain static based off our selections.
We've got one more question. It's, did you make your own dark theme?
Yeah, so I used Sheet Menu to apply some of the coloring on the background, and then the regular colors from the selections to color the rest of my dashboard. So I guess, yes, I kind of created my own dark theme, but it all stemmed off of what looked best in the map.
Wow. Okay, that's great.
Love the round bars. Me too. I think that the round bars are really nice when you're using a bar chart to represent ranking. It's less harsh than those straight edges. So yeah, that's why I use it in this case.
Agreed. We've got one more minute. So before we go anywhere, I do want to promote a Squid Game. It's for next week's Appy Hour. Joe Warbington, he is conducting a survey. So if you'd like to join in on our Squid Game, game, let us know. You just need to fill out the survey. You don't need to actually play or do anything. You just submit your names, and then we'll kind of choose live who gets eliminated, and the winners might get a little something something. So if you want to participate and maybe see your name on there, we won't be giving out any personal information live. It will just be your name. So if you'd like to do that, please click the link in the comments.
I'll just leave us with this. As we wrap up, data literacy has been the theme undergoing all of Let Your Data Do the Talking. And so just want to close out with some tools and resources, finding a mentor, connecting with networks in your area. There's amazing books out there and other resources that you can use. And then obviously go out and try different BI tools, get familiar with that space, and it'll really help you to see how you can let your data do the talking. So I think we'll have this app. This is a Qlik Sense app that I've created to kind of go through our story. And so I think we'll be making this publicly available soon that you can download from our app gallery.
Awesome. Thank you for this. This has been really great.
It's been so much fun chatting with you, Jane, about data literacy.
I agree. This has been eye-opening. I've learned so many new things, and I can't wait to apply them. Perfect. Thanks. Well, thanks for a successful Appy Hour. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. And I'll see everybody next week for Squid Game. Awesome. All right. Bye, guys.